Hello, hello, hello. Glad to have everybody back. And man, we've got a lot to talk about. And of course, it's the usual stuff with courts and injunctions and temporary restraining orders and judges' decisions, as we seemingly always have that going on in the world of college athletics now. But we've actually got some good things to talk about. We've got some good things going on in basketball, some bad things as well. A couple of key injuries here and there we'll get to in a moment. But man, I'm so excited for the upcoming weekend in basketball for myriad reasons, but mainly because we're going to get women's basketball in a really, really, really valuable time slot, 8:30 on Saturday. We got South Carolina, number 3 in the country, going to play LSU, number 6 in the country, 8:30 Saturday night on ABC. I'm over the moon about this because it's really a good rivalry, even though it's very one-sided, believe it or not, that despite all the pomp and circumstances and everything around this game for years, and the alpha coaches, Don Staley with South Carolina, Kim Mulkey with LSU, it's actually a pretty one-sided rivalry for the better part of the last decade and a half. But still, it drives excitement, and part of it is because of how the games have played out. Some of them have been really, really close. Some of them have been very feisty. I think about the SEC championship game a couple of years ago, actual on the court brawl, guy coming out of the stands, and just so much going on with that. Just this is an enticing matchup. We got Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News. She's going to be at the game, covering the game, LSU in South Carolina. She's going to join us in a few moments, and I want to discuss this game. I want to discuss why it's important between the two teams. Why is it important for the SEC, which is absolutely lights out in women's college basketball? And why is it important for the game in general and perhaps society? I think this is a big deal for it to be on network television on a Saturday night in February, Valentine's Day, 8:30 time slot Eastern. This is tremendous. This is tremendous. And it says a lot about the forward thinking of the networks, but also the state of the game. And yeah, it's forward thinking, but those guys are business people. They're smart. They see a product that's trending upward, and they want to get a piece of that. We'll discuss that with Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News when she joins us in a moment. Let's get to some headlines right now. And it's been a busy day in court. After working hours, after business had closed, we got a ruling in Mississippi. Trinidad Chambliss is going to be back. He's going to be back. He's been approved for the 2026 season down in a Mississippi courtroom. I agree with it because by all accounts, he had a legitimate medical condition that kept him from maximizing his time while at other universities, other schools. So good for them. Good for Trinidad Chambliss. Good for the judge. It's just kind of funny though. Judge Whitwell, I think it's Judge Robert Whitwell. He gave his ruling over about 90 minutes. Very detailed, kept flipping page after page and going over each word of his ruling. So nobody can criticize the thoroughness of his ruling. And he said the NCAA screwed up. They said he should have gotten a medical hardship waiver in 2022. They didn't give it to him, and he deserved it, so he's coming back. 30 total touchdowns, 8th in Heisman Trophy voting for the Rebels last year en route to the college football playoff, and absolutely lights out in the college football playoff. He was fantastic. This is a big deal for Pete Golding. This is a huge deal for Pete Golding to have somebody like Trinidad Chambliss coming back. And remember, he wasn't even the starter week 0, week 1. Austin Simmons was the starting quarterback. He got injured. Trinidad Chambliss comes in, and he doesn't leave. This is significant. So good on Ole Miss for getting this one, because I do agree with it. Everything I had read about his case, it was pretty clear that he deserved that medical red shirt, and good on him. I'm still wondering, though, what's going to happen with the tampering deal. Ole Miss and Clemson and Ole Miss. Ole Miss tampering with the Luke Farrelly, who's now at Ole Miss. He was at Clemson, the linebacker. Haven't heard anything. What's Keith Carter, the athletic director, going to do to Pete Golding? Will he do anything to Pete Golding? Will Greg Sankey say anything? Will Jim Phillips say anything? Are we going to have to wait till media days? So many questions with regards to that. But that's another topic for another time. Speaking in courtrooms, and this one sucks big time. I actually wrote a column about it a few months ago. College of Charleston guard Connor Hickman, transfer from Cincinnati. He was ruled ineligible for the rest of the season. He had gotten a temporary restraining order back in November to allow him to play for the Cougars. He had injured his foot early in his last season in Cincinnati. They didn't tell him that surgery was an option until he absolutely couldn't move on it anymore. And by that point, he had eclipsed the number of games played in order to maintain that season of eligibility. Got really bad information. And by all accounts, everybody at Cincinnati, medical staff, administrative staff, coaching staff, they were supportive of him getting another season. But for some reason, a judge has decided no. I guess they can appeal and chase other routes, but given the timing of it, we're middle of February, I have to think he's done. He was a grad student already. I could just see him moving on. Truly, I can. And that's unfortunate because he was a class kid, but we'll see. Played 20 games for the Cougars this year, 11.7 points, 3.6 rebounds. Here's some crappy news out of Chapel Hill. Caleb Williams, he's out indefinitely with a broken hand. He did it the other night in that loss at Miami, 75-66 loss at Miami, which came just, about 48 hours after that magnificent win over the Duke Blue Devils, the Tobacco Road rivalry, the greatest rivalry in college basketball. That's not good. I mean, he's one of the rising stars, not only in the ACC, but in all of college basketball, and he's going to be out indefinitely. And he sent out a statement earlier just basically talking about the injury. And I'm going to read that really quickly here, if we can pull that up on the old X machine. And he just says he'll be back. He says he's going to overcome. I'm grateful for whatever God is trying to tell me through this injury. 3 exclamation points. I will be back, Tar Heel Nation. I love this team and program. Hashtag stay tuned. And they were kind of quiet about it after it happened. No real clarity, even on Wednesday when Hubert Davis met with the media. I had a feeling that it was something wrist-related by the way it was taped. They kept saying hand injury on the telecast, and I'm like, no, they wouldn't necessarily have the wrist locked down if it were a hand injury, but if it's a wrist injury, you're going to lock the hand down because you got to keep that thing from flexing. And I was thinking it was either wrist or perhaps thumb, and indeed it is a wrist injury. It's his non-shooting hand. That's the saving grace in all of this, but how long he'll be out, who knows? Is it broken? Is it sprained? They're not really offering a whole lot of clarity behind that. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Again, 19.8 points, 9.4 rebounds, 2.7 assists. UNC 11th in the country. They're going to play Pittsburgh on Saturday. Started the show by talking about women's basketball and the SEC. 9 ranked teams in the AP Women's Top 25 for the Southeastern Conference. 9. And that includes 3, 4, 5, and 6. Number 3 being South Carolina. Number 6 being LSU. And they're going to play Saturday night, 8:30 Eastern time on ABC. Prime time. That is a big deal. And it's Mulkey versus Staley. It's the return of Malaysia Fulwiley. Or not the return, but she's going to play her former team, the Gamecocks, for the first time since she transferred to LSU. And remember, she's a South Carolina native, Columbia native. So there's a lot of subplots to all of this. But one of the bigger subplots, isn't it actually a rivalry? South Carolina has been so dominant in this rivalry, at least on the final scoreboard, wins or losses, that you wonder. It still has so much juice, so much heat, but should we call it a rivalry? Should we call Texas, South Carolina the preeminent rivalry in the SEC? It's a good question. We'll ask Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News when she joins us in just a moment. Stick around.
Sports fans, it's time to gear up. Head to fanstreamsports.com and check out our brand new merchandise store. We're talking bold t-shirts, 3/4 zips, hoodies, hats, mugs, and more. Everything you need to rep your favorite shows and your favorite crew. Whether you're rolling with the JP Peterson Show in Tampa Bay, From the Rough in Dallas, the Tim May Show featuring Clay Hall, or the Jeff Thidoff Show in Ohio, or any of our Fanstream Sports original programming, we've got the perfect look for game day and every day. So don't wait. fanstreamsports.com. Click merch and grab your gear now. Wear the stream, live the stream, fanstreamsports.com.
Fantastic weekend of college basketball ahead. Fantastic weekend of women's college basketball ahead. And I have this question. With this smorgasbord of great games that we have laid out in front of us. The primetime position on ABC isn't going to the likes of Duke men. It's not going to the likes of UConn and Hurley and all that. It's going to South Carolina and LSU women. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Dawn Staley versus Kim Mulkey, even they'll tell you that's not the case, but we know it's the case. And we're going to ask our friend Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News, is it Dawn versus Mulkey? I mean, that's basically what it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's good TV. It's good basketball. Obviously, there's been some recent, I guess you could say, chaos or stuff between the teams, and then obviously the Mylesia Fulwiley element of it all. But in reality, it's two of the best women's basketball coaches facing off, and they produce high-level basketball, and that's what I think everyone, including ESPN and ABC, anticipate on Saturday.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Lulu. In your excellent reporting, I picked up a few factoids. LSU leads this series 22-21. It goes back to 1976. That is correct, yes?
Yes.
Oh,
At
okay.
least on the yeah.
Okay. But South Carolina has won 17 in a row. The LSU has not defeated South Carolina with Dawn Staley as the head coach.
Correct.
That is absolutely incredible. How does that happen?
Yeah. I mean, Mulkey is looking for her first against Dawn Staley in the sense of at LSU. She beat her twice at Baylor. Kim is 0-5 in LSU matchups, if we're counting, in her time. So it kind of feeds into the question, like, is this a rivalry? It's hard but when you look at it, LSU won 14 straight. The years of dominance didn't necessarily balance out in my eyes. The years where LSU was really good, South Carolina wasn't quite there yet. And now it's interesting because LSU is there. LSU has won a national championship under Kim Mulkey, but their sort of last thing that it seems like they're still trying to figure out is, okay, how do we beat South Carolina? And people argue that this is their best shot. This is their best team. I don't know if I entirely see it that way, but at the same time, you look at what LSU and South Carolina consistently bring, and you wonder, how has it not been more back and forth?
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm looking now, and again, because of your excellent reporting, pointed out to me that these teams have recently won 3 national championships, 2 by South Carolina, 1 by LSU. That was in 2023. It always seems to be the premier event, and yet the Gamecocks have consistently come away with the victory. My point is this is a long-winded way of me getting to this point. Kim Mulkey is like the ultimate competitor. And for her to have this skid, for lack of a better word, that she's going on right now, that's got to be absolutely gnawing at her. I mean, do you get the sense that if they lose again, she might just absolutely lose her mind on Saturday night?
In some ways, yes. And I also want to make sure I correct myself, and the sense that I believe the last time LSU won was 2012. So Dawn has lost to LSU, but Mulkey hasn't beaten Dawn at LSU. To answer your question, I think that I read an LSU reporter's story here that, I'm pretty sure 10 other SEC teams, I could be misremembering, but 10 other SEC teams have picked up a win over South Carolina in this Dawn Staley, dominant era. LSU has not been one of those. I do think that it's definitely something that everybody on the LSU side of things is dying to cross off. I think South Carolina is in a really great position this year because, as Dawn pointed out, win, lose, or draw, to quote her, it doesn't hurt us. I think South Carolina is fortunate that LSU already dropped 3 conference games, and that's more to the X's and O's of this year. But I do think there's a lot riding on this year because LSU has continuously watched teams do what they have been trying to do, for 17 years, let alone the last 5. And you look at even an Oklahoma team, and then Leah Chavez she did something that Flau'jae Johnson has been trying to do the past 3 years. There's a lot going into this for sure.
Yeah, and you think about everything Vic Schaefer's accomplished at Texas against South Carolina just in recent memory. That's just got to be gnawing at Kim Mulkey. I remember being in the media center at Colonial Life last year when LSU ran into town, and she insisted it's not about her versus Dawn versus Kim Mulkey. It's about a great rivalry that elevates all of college basketball. And I agree with that. I agree with that to a point. But that rivalry, man, I mean, it's one of those things, Lulu, and I look forward to getting your thoughts on this. It's one of those things that I think has helped elevate this sport to the point where it's higher now, and as far as interest than it's ever been. We have these rivalries and these individual rivalries. We haven't really had anything like that in the history of the game other than that window of time when we had Pat Summitt versus Gino, and then when Pat stepped down and unfortunately went away, and it was just Gino for so long. Yeah, you had periods where Mulkey was the other end of that formula at Baylor. You had other coaches, Muffet McGraw, people like that along the way, but it was never that dynamic like it was with Pat and Gino. Now we have that with Mulkey and Dawn, and I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll quote a quote from Kim 2 years ago that I used in the story. It's like, before the last time that South Carolina played at the PMAC, Kim said something along the lines of like, I don't care what anyone says, it doesn't get much better than what, you and I put on this floor. And that says a lot about what she thinks about. I know that obviously she might think, oh, it's a rivalry, it's not about me versus Dawn, but there's nothing wrong with acknowledging what Dawn versus Kim brings to this sport. And I want to kind of quote something that Dawn says, and she's used this for different contexts, but sort of the same vein is like, treat us like a sport. Let us have trash talk. Criticize us. Don't pamper, don't baby us. And I think this is like the perfect example of a women's college basketball matchup that has sort of so much juice to it in a way that just speaks to high-level women's basketball, high-level basketball in general. Like, yeah, people might want to draw to the storyline of the scuffle 2 years ago or the DJ incident last year, but you take away all the off-court antics, this rivalry would still be exactly what it is. And I think that really speaks to the culture that Dawn and Kim create of just always showing up when the lights are on. Yeah, there will be games where I think 2-3 years ago, whatever year LSU won, so 23, South Carolina blew them out. I think it was a 23-point victory. Like, yeah, maybe the lights were a little bright that day for LSU, but still, they deliver. And when you consistently have, like, I was talking to another reporter, you look at the schedule ahead of this year, right? You could have said Notre Dame versus UConn would have been a marquee matchup. You could have said that UConn-Tennessee, because Tennessee upset UConn last year. They didn't deliver. These were different teams, and both games were kind of not fun because it was a blowout in the second half. I don't anticipate it with this one, and I think that says a lot about a coach, or two coaches for that matter, that can consistently bring different teams of different players that are ready no matter how big the stage is, how crazy the atmosphere is.
You bring up a really interesting point, and I wrote this in a column back in the summer when Christine Brennan dropped her book on her game about Caitlin Clark. And it was just how everybody was so unprepared for the phenomenon of Caitlin Clark, not only how to cash in on it and to expand it and to elevate the floor of women's basketball, but just in general, how to treat the athletes. We talk about the media, they're too hard on them, No. They should treat them exactly as they want to be treated, just like the male athletes. They want to be questioned. They want to be asked to be criticized just like the male athletes. And I think to act gingerly around them just because they're females, I think that is insulting, first of all. But I also think it's damning as far as the growth of the sport. What's your take?
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. And I think it's a line that a lot of people are trying to walk. It's conversations that I've had with national media, and it's conversations I've had in job interviews, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging when a women's basketball player has a bad night. If you are covering that team and that player did not play well, it will not hurt the sport by acknowledging that they weren't living up to the expectation that they set for themselves, that their coach set. And I think Dawn is a prime example of somebody that's attempting to bridge that gap and sort of mend whatever disconnect there's been, where people assume or think that it's hurtful to the women's sports world to acknowledge when things aren't perfect.
Dawn, and I've always said this about Dawn Staley, and this is where she's different than Kim Mulkey, because Kim Mulkey seems to already have a message in mind that she wants to deliver, and she's already thinking about her response to your question while you're still asking your question and your follow-up. But Dawn really is so thoughtful with everything she says. I mean, every word that comes out of her mouth there's a point to it. And I really find her to be a profound speaker. She has a voice, but she doesn't preach. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And I also think that in some ways, like, I feel for Dawn because I think that she is often asked to play a role in so many different spaces. Like I look at the, SEC Media Day, she's asked about Kentucky. She's asked about the Knicks job again. Like, yes, those are storylines, but at the same time, like, I think a lot of people know you put a Dawn Staley quote in your story, it's a lot different. And sometimes I think she just wants to coach basketball and coach her team and focus on South Carolina. And yet when she's still in those spaces where she's asked these questions, she delivers an answer that is thoughtful. Like, she really doesn't. I've heard some pretty like random questions thrown towards Dawn Staley, and the fact that she still makes them sound like they were, prize winners. It's impressive.
Well, that's her ability to make everybody feel respected and treated like a human being. Lulu, just a couple more minutes, please. And you talk about her being asked questions about Kentucky and other programs in the Southeastern Conference. Absolutely unbelievable in women's basketball. 4 of the top 6 teams in the most recent AP Top 25 are from the SEC. South Carolina, number 3rd. 5 of 10, 7 of 18, 9 of 23. And there's also a game coming up, Texas versus Kentucky. That's a 14 versus an 18. That's going to be a fantastic matchup. But my point is this: with this game coming on Saturday night, primetime audience, and it's presumably, despite everything I just told you about all these other ranked teams and fantastic matchups, this is the rivalry in women's college basketball that's dominated this conversation. How much of a risk is it, though, for ABC, ESPN to prop this game up the way it is propping it up, especially considering that the last time they did something like this, or we had a rivalry that was supposed to be a big-time rivalry, Tennessee and South Carolina less than a week ago, South Carolina beat the Volunteers by 43 points in historical beating. How far out on a branch, on a limb, is ESPN going with this?
Mm-hmm. I honestly would argue not that far out. And look, maybe I'm going to eat my words and it's going to be a big a blowout and sort of a snooze fest. But I just, based on history, like, you got to lean into what these two teams have given the last few years. And I don't see it going that way. I said this morning that the only way I see it being more than a 10-point victory for either team would be the foul game in the last 2 minutes or last 1 minute, where that just kind of changes things final score wise. But I think that these are two programs that, I mean, heck, you could also say, Lulu, you're wrong because South Carolina got blown out by UConn, and I wouldn't have guessed that last year. Of course, it is a gamble, it is a risk, but I think what they probably are leaning into, and it's a safe bet, is that no matter what, at least it's the first time Mylasia Full-Wiley's playing her old team, right? And unfortunately for Lay, it's a storyline either way. She's either going to score a lot and it's going to be great, or she's not. But that's something that people are going to have to talk about either way. So it's a safe bet in that regard.
I'm glad you brought her up. I look at her numbers now. They're not a whole lot different than her numbers at South Carolina, maybe a couple more points, maybe another assist, so on and so forth. Do you think this is what she expected when she went to LSU? Did she have visions of, I mean, she was already going to a fantastic roster. Do you think, and you can only speak so much for her, do you think that she expected to go to this LSU program, be the person who was going to carry them night in and night out? How did you read that whole situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard, right? I'm not her, but at the same time, you look at it two ways and you think, why would someone leave a place maybe in part because they weren't starting to go to a place where it's not guaranteed that they're going to start there. But at the same time, Lay's a smart kid. She knows who LSU still had. I don't know for sure if this is entirely what she envisioned, but at the same time, and this isn't to necessarily put her in this victim role because she made a choice, but this also, like, let's acknowledge it's a hard year to go from a sophomore to a junior as a transfer, because that's when you should really grow, right? When I'm assessing players, that's what I look at the most growth. Yes, you can talk about junior to senior year, and that jump matters too, but like, you're not an underclassman anymore as a junior. You should be expected to make a jump. I point to someone like Tessa Johnson, who is doing exactly what Dawn needed her to do last year, was maybe a little too young, wasn't ready, but she's making that jump now, and that's what matters. So I think in some ways it's hard. I think that talking to many, many people, like, and you know what? It doesn't matter. Lay's story, why she went, that can remain entirely up to her. She can say bits and pieces. Obviously, a fresh start is something that she's often said. But the whole idea of like going and learning the point guard role, she's not really playing point guard. There's a lot of dynamic, I guess, just angles to look at it. I mean, yes, in some ways it's probably what she expected and should have, considering she wasn't going to go in there and move Michaela Williams or Flau'jae Johnson out of their position. But at the same time, it is hard to believe that she didn't recognize or would, leave a place like South Carolina if she didn't know what to expect.
I will put a pin in it, and just before saying this, if you're wanting to learn to play the guard position and the point guard position, it sounds like you don't leave the tutelage of the greatest point guard perhaps in women's basketball history to go do it. I know disrespect to Kim Mulkey, but I'm just saying you can read between the lines. Lulu, one more thing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on it. I watched South Carolina women this year, and I've been so impressed with the bench depth. And Dawn Staley always has a fantastic bench. But there's one player in particular who's caught my attention. And I'm blown away night in and night out by her overall game, from the way she plays down in the paint to the way she runs the court. Help me if I butcher her name. I'm talking about Alicia Turnebys?
Alicia Turnebys. Yeah, you can call her
Fantastic.
Alex. Yeah,
fantastic all-around game.
Yeah.
Tell me about her.
Yeah, so it's so funny because she's the definition of somebody that I have to catch myself not getting too high or too low with, right? Because she has these moments where I'm like, holy beep, that is unreal. And then she has these moments where I'm like, ooh, maybe I jumped too far. I think if she plays similar to the way that she played against Tennessee, and granted, let's be real, it's going to be an entirely different atmosphere. And I think Dawn knows her well enough and respects her enough to recognize, like, it might be a little too much mentally for a player that barely has lived in America to play in a rowdy, crazy, chaotic environment on the road in a game that they really want to win. However, she's an X factor just based on the fact that she is 6'7" and can shoot the three from we saw her shoot it from the corner and the top of the key against Tennessee on Sunday, but also can develop a high-low game with Okot and with Joyce Edwards in just ways that other post players haven't this year. I think that whatever version of Turnebys that South Carolina gets is just going to be an additional factor. I don't think she's going to be, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm not giving her enough credit, or I'm babying her subconsciously, but like, I don't see her being a fundamental part of Dawn's game plan just based on the stakes. But that said, she elevates South Carolina so much that is like Oklahoma. It was an intense road game. And in my opinion, she was the best big they had. Mm-hmm. Granted, it was an off night for both Okot and Edwards, but still, like, if she gives even an ounce of that, LSU's tallest player is 6'5" and doesn't play anywhere near the style that Turnebys does. If Turnebys is willing to play on the wing and be a threat from the three and give Joyce Edwards full control of the paint, like, that's exactly what South Carolina needs to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, she would step out. Okot would have to go so far out of her comfort zone and stretch the inside, because Turnebys is out spotting up, going to shoot threes, or at least there was the threat of it. I just think it's an incredible weapon. My last question for you, and as realistically as you can predict, what's her ceiling? What does she look like maybe next year, maybe in 2 years?
Yeah. I think strength plays a huge role. I think rebounding is probably her weakest point right now. I talked to her old teammate, and her old teammate was like, she reminds me of Wemby. And like, I'm not going to say, look, I think she could be huge for South Carolina in the next 2 years. I think Dawn is the perfect person for her. I think that the system that South Carolina has that runs through forwards, that runs through centers, but also sort of lets their own individual skill carry. I think that when it's all said and done, if Okot doesn't return next year, Dawn is in very good hands with, assuming Chloe Kitts is back, with having Turnebys either start or be the main with Joyce Edwards. It's a dangerous lineup to face. I think that she brings so much to the offensive end. She sees the floor incredibly well. She is fast and lanky. She can carry it up the floor herself. I mean, everyone focuses like on the fact that she can dunk. Like, yeah, that's a threat too, but man, oh man, can she shoot the ball. Her spot up jumpers are so textbook and so like vintage Dawn Staley era that I do think that she's going to be trouble. She's going to be trouble.
Yeah, I was reading she had a two-handed dunk in the 2025 FIBA U18 Women's Euro Basket. A two-handed – Lulu, can you jam two-handed?
I can't. I can palm a men's ball for like 2 seconds though.
Can you really?
Yeah.
Does that help with your typing?
I wish. Someone told me I'd be really good at piano, but doesn't do anything else.
Lulu, you're the best. I know you're headed down to Baton Rouge. Will this be your first women's game? I know you've been there for football. Will this be your first women's game?
Yeah.
That's got to be exciting.
I know. And I love all the South Carolina, or excuse me, LSU reporters. We're all good friends. So that's even more fun.
Yeah. Shout out to Corey Diaz.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the all-time greats. Well, listen, you're one of the best. I appreciate your time. I want to wish you safe travels. And let's be sure that we get you back on very, very soon, Lulu.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News. Enjoyed our talk with Lulu Kesin. Lulu knows ball. She knows women's basketball upside down, all around. Her knowledge is fantastic, and her passion for the game. Lulu played. She played ball coming through school, so she got a really bright future ahead of her. I asked her this question, though, and I'm remiss that I didn't explore it farther. Is this a risk? Is this a risk for ABC/ESPN to prop this game up the way it is in a primetime window, a not primetime Saturday window? I mean, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And I think it is. I think it is because this is an opportunity to continue riding that wave, or rather that trend. It's probably a better way to frame it, of women's basketball. But the danger is that it is a flat game. A low-scoring game, a turnover-prone game, a game where the teams shoot only 30% each. I mean, the audiences are already so critical. They're so skeptical. They're waiting for the balloon to pop with regards to women's basketball. And for it to happen on a primetime window that's getting so much hype, that would be pretty damning. And there's a possibility it could happen if recent history has taught us anything. We think about and it's not apples to apples, but we think about how South Carolina put a whipping on Tennessee just a few days ago. I'm not saying it's the exact same. I'm not saying Tennessee's as good as LSU or vice versa, anything like that, but that's a storied program. And you don't expect a storied program like that to get curb stomped by 43 points. You just don't expect that. And how will this game be judged if either team wins by 20? Particularly if it's the Gamecocks, given their dominance in this series over the last decade and a half. What will be the biggest takeaway? Will it be an error on the network executive's part that if they were going to put up a women's game that they should pick a better game? Will it be more damning from Mulkey? Will it take some luster off this rivalry going forward if one team or another loses in such a fashion? If LSU goes out and wins by 20, it would probably elevate the rivalry, but it would probably crush it or at least dampen it to it significantly if South Carolina extends its dominance in that kind of fashion. I'm already of the mind that the people who know, they know that the one right now in the SEC is Texas and South Carolina, the way that's played out for the better part of about 2 years. But it's so desirous for this LSU-South Carolina rivalry to live up to things, because you do have these alphas as coaches, these legendary coaches who were legendary players, these programs that are so passionate. And part of it also with regards to Texas, still trying to integrate them into the conference, still trying to embrace everything the Longhorns are about. If in a positive vein, and I'll close with this, in a positive vein, if this game turns out to be what the network executives hope it'll be, a close matchup, two really blue-blooded programs. I'll throw that word out there, blue-blooded. I know when you think of women's college basketball, the first two to pop to mind are Tennessee and UConn, but I think these apply. LSU, especially if it wins another championship. But if it turns out to be the game that they're hoping for, will we see more of these contests going forward? Will they start making 8:30 on Saturday nights at such and such time of year designated for women's basketball? I could see that happening. Right now, you think about the vast majority of games, are Sunday, Thursday. Could they start, shoehorning more in on Saturday nights? I think it's going to happen, and I hate to be that guy, but it goes back to the rise of the quality of the sport. It's so wonderful now, and it starts at the feeder systems and the travel teams and all that, but also the Caitlin Clark effect. Interest in the sport skyrocketed to never before seen levels when she was at Iowa, and they're still getting that. And if they can put on a classic Saturday night, it's just going to buoy it even farther. It's going to further cement the underpinning that's still being formed from the Caitlin Clark effect. You get what I'm saying? It'll solidify all that, and it'll raise the roof even more. 8:30 Saturday night, Eastern time on ABC, ESPN. That's it for this episode. Still got some legal things to dive into. With regards to the Trinidad Chambliss case, this Connor Hickman thing sucks. Pavia's still got some court stuff going on. I don't think he comes back, but they're seeing that whole deal through. We'll explore that in another episode. I want to thank Lulu Kesin of the Greenville News for stopping by. Be sure to check out her work. Just absolutely fantastic, her coverage at the University of South Carolina. Remember, this podcast, do what you do for all podcasts. Like, subscribe, whatever, wherever you consume it. Drop some comments or hit me up directly on Twitter, X, at Scott H Sports. Questions, comments, complaints, anything you got, send it to me. If there's a topic you want to see discussed, happy to do it. If there's a guest that you would like to see me wrangle on, I'll try my darndest to facilitate it. But let me know what's on your mind. Otherwise, I've got some reading to do. I've got some ball to watch. And until next time, be safe.